Hello and welcome to the Economic Times Young Leaders, an event that aims to celebrate leadership of tomorrow. Over the last 5 months, some serious brainstorming has happened between an eminent jury and plenty of young leaders across India Inc. in an endeavor to select who will be the leaders of tomorrow. And that's why today we have a special interactive discussion between 5 CEOs of India Inc. who will now give a bit of bring an interaction and give some ideas to young leaders of today how to become young leaders of tomorrow. Let me first introduce my special panel today on the show. From JP Morgan, we have Kalpana Morparia. From McKinsey, we've got Mr. Adil Zainubai. Nitin Paranjape from HUL. Also on the show, Pramod Bhasin of Genpact. And how can I forget Harsh Mariwala of Marico. And 5 young leaders who are joining us here on this stage to engage with them in an interactive session. Amulya Goyal is with us on the show. Another young leader is Atma Shivalanka. We've got Nidhi Goyal as well. And with me right here are Preetam Datta and Rajesh Jai Singh. Thank you all for being here on the show. And it's my pleasure to begin the discussion with the one question that's come to every single young leader's mind. What does it take to be a young leader? I'll start with you, Kalpana.
So, sometimes I feel I've got to ask them this question is to say, tell me what it is to be a young leader, because each one of us this side, with the probable exception of Nitin, would love to know the answer to that one. Because if I could trade places with any one of you, I'd do it in a heartbeat. You are, I think, the blessed amongst young leaders anywhere in the world, and I include China in that, because India is at such a wonderful cusp today. The opportunities abound. You've been blessed with excellent education, and I cannot think about a sweeter spot really in the history of our nation in the times to come that you're in today. So plenty of opportunities. The only limiting factor is your own ambition.
Is your own ambition. Pramod, you would switch places? I mean, barring for the idea of having not white hair, but black, at least for now.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think the opportunity that these young leaders have before them, as Kalpana said, is unparalleled. It's almost like there's a new railroad being built through India. Now, that railroad may be with broadband, it may be with technology, it could be with a new type of entrepreneur or retail stores or businesses. But the opportunity that throws out for people who can grab it is immense. And I don't think I've ever seen, again, this promise reflected as widely as it can be. I would add a couple of other things. I think global exposure, I hope, has helped all of them be a lot better than we were at their ages. I don't think, I'll speak for myself, I guess I shouldn't speak for all of you. I know I didn't have the brain capacity at that point in time to do the multiplicity of things these young leaders are able to do, to absorb the input, digest the information, come out with analysis and thoughts in a way that is unparalleled. And I think that in itself launches 1,000 ideas. So,
okay, away from brain capacity, let me replace that with bandwidth and ask Mr. Mariwala to pick up three key qualities that you as a leader look for when you've got a young leader sitting in front. And you've got plenty here.
I think the first thing I would look at is, what is the desire to succeed? Is there a burning desire to succeed? And that gets translated into ambition, execution, persistence. So I think that covers virtually learning. So I think that's very, very critical. Number 2, I think learning, it's very important that every person goes through setbacks in life. And if you look at setbacks as learning rather than learning and risk-taking, basically, is very, very important. Yeah. And the third is, I would say, at an individual level, I think humility is very important for any leader, because everybody has a blind spot, Even the best leader has blind spot. And if he thinks that he knows it all, then forget it. I mean, it's gone. He's history, in my opinion, Even the most management students from the best of schools, and I'm sure Nitin would say that, I mean, they learn maximum when they are in the field with distributor reps, And so first thing when I tell RMT is, please don't think that you arrived in life.
Yeah.
You have to, this is just the beginning,
Okay, fire in the belly, something you alluded to, but Nitin, there is always that dilemma, be the jack of all trades or be the master of one. How does a young leader look at those two aspects?
So I don't see a dilemma. I think as a leader who's there to lead, I cannot imagine you being in a position to lead without having a reasonably good perspective of the drivers of business that you've got. So you need to have that. Equally, it's impossible in today's world to actually lead without having some expertise, some domain understanding in one core area. So the way I see it is you have no choice but to have a very good understanding of all the drivers of business, and it would be nice for you to have some expertise in your chosen field.
Adil, we're also in times today which are challenging, and all these young leaders are faced with real situations. Do you think the qualities that a young leader needs today are so different from the ones that they needed, let's say, about a decade or two ago?
But generally, leadership also grows depending on the situation. So, because the economy is growing so well and there are so many opportunities, you'd expect to see more leaders emerge. If the economy was in terrible shape and there were no economic opportunities, I think you'd just see the same characteristics not really lead to the kind of leadership that you'd see today. So, Kalpana, I'd agree with you that the timing, the reason I would trade places, of course, is it's nice to have hair again. So, but, this is such a time filled with opportunity that the chances that one's leadership qualities can shine and that you can succeed based on that is much higher than it would have been in other times, right? So I think the timing is great to do that. I would look for two other things, right, which I think, Harsh, you said, and I'll just amplify on it. One is, I look for people who have failed, okay? If you've succeeded at everything in life, you don't know what it's like when things don't work. And the ability to rebound from that and learn from it and come back is very important. We do have some people who have done outstandingly well in school and college and at their first job, and until they hit their first failure, you don't know whether they have the leadership characteristics, no matter what you think, right? So I look for people who have failure. And I think the second point that you raised, which is the ambition, the burning desire, I just call it drive. And it's particularly important in India because everything takes more effort. And if you are easily dissuaded, then it's much more difficult to succeed. So I would say, in addition to having a fantastic economy where you have great opportunities, the characteristics of drive, the characteristics of being able to recover from failures is what one looks for.
So that means even leadership qualities have that big question, risk versus reward. So let me first get Nidhi to ask a question because she has a situation. She wants to know about the times we live in today.
So we grew up hearing that greed is good and, it's not really the evil thing that it's made out to be. But then over the last couple of years, we saw that, maybe not greed, but reasonable risks are good. And, you need to really define that thin line between the two. And I'm struggling to understand how do you do that? Because I'm almost looking, reaching out to all of you to share your perspective. I don't think any of the corporations wanted to get onto the other side of the reasonable risks line. So, how do you keep that in mind?
Okay. Should we start with you, Kalpana?
Yeah, so I knew this question was going to come to me as a banker here. So, I think it's very important for every person and every corporate to continuously remind themselves of the purpose why the society has allowed them to be in business. So I'm still not going away from that statement to say greed is indeed good because it creates that hunger in you, the drive that we referred to. But we should never ever forget that there is a particular purpose behind which we were created, allowed by society to continue doing business. And I think instances over the last few years, including examples from my own industry, actually seem to suggest that we probably somewhere lost that purpose along the line.
But where does that thinking begin? The idea that while greed could lead you to discontent, at some point that's a very positive idea. Does it begin with the leader, Harsh Mariwala? Does it begin from the young leader? Should they look up to their seniors? Which side does it begin?
See, I have a little disagreement with Kalpana as well as with her that I don't think greed drives individuals, If you ask 10 entrepreneurs, nobody will say money drives me, Money is important up to a certain point, but beyond a point, money is least important. And I think it is, what are you giving back? But I agree with Kalpana about the purpose part. I fully agree with her on the purpose part. That purpose is very important. Why are you on this earth? You are sent with a certain message. You have to give something back. And that pleasure you get out of giving back or contributing something, either to the society or basically to the whatever you're doing, I think that is why entrepreneurs work, and build business. I don't think they work for money.
Okay, I can hear both of you. One of you is nodding this way. Well, that's also the Indian nod, but you've got to tell me what you think.
I would agree. I personally have never liked that phrase, greed is good. I think it's an incorrect phrase, and I don't think it adequately describes what it's trying to do. It was formed, you must remember, on Wall Street, where perhaps greed is good. But I don't think it's good anywhere else in the world. And I've worked on Wall Street also for a long time, so I can take my share of that. I do think that when you talk about risks and what risks you take, all of us have to think about that internally. It's a moral issue that we must internalize, and you have to live comfortably within yourself. So we have some sayings in Genpact that we use, for instance, which we say, don't even think about going near that line. There is no business you want to do in your life that is worth crossing the line. You should be very clear about that. Secondly, when we talk about money, we should also be very clear. 10 years from now, I can't remember how much money I made 10 years ago. What I will remember is what impact I had, who I made, who I liked, did I make a difference to people's lives, and that's ultimately what will be important. And that's ultimately what will drive
But is it important? And is it important to our young leaders? So let's start asking our young leaders, is that what is important to you?
Definitely is important. I think a lot of whatever he says gels with my thoughts as well. It's important to have a more of a goal to define rather than money as a target or an objective.
Let's get some quick answers there. Preetham, what do you think?
Yeah, I also feel the same. Basically, it's the bigger picture or the bigger drive that helps. Because if you are just going for money or greed, that only takes you to a certain point. But beyond that, it's the whole contribution to the society that helps.
But is Atma, for example, fire in the belly and greed two sides of the same coin?
I think that even an entrepreneur must have that kind of fire in the belly. And that comes with some training, but there's also some innate element to it. I've had the privilege of being both an entrepreneur as well as being in finance. And I think that on both sides, I've seen that an individual must have the drive, the ambition to be successful. In finance, you have to have the drive to make money. And in entrepreneurship, you have to have the drive to do something you're passionate about.
Okay, so how do people then measure reward? Nitin, for many of these, young, I would say, then some of them are partly entrepreneurs or will become, but they largely are young people within the corporate system. Now, that's a system that's going to take time for them to go up the ladder. What should their goals be like? Will it be about a reward that's equal to money or to designation? What should they look for?
I think the reality is that a large number of people who are getting into industry today are driven by money. That's the unfortunate truth that I observe. A very, very large number of people see success equal to money, and therefore their actions are driven by the motive of making more money. And more money means more success. I do think it's a very flawed way of thinking when it comes from my perspective, and maybe you could say I'm not the young person who's getting in today, and it's easy for me to say so, but I don't think, if I was to make just one comment, when I joined an organization, I think the criteria was not to make more money. The criteria was to join a place which gave me a sense of fulfillment, made me feel that I was doing things which were consistent with what I believed in, gave me an opportunity to grow, and I would say that to everyone who's coming in here. There's plenty of opportunity that you've got in your life, and you will get rewarded. Money will be a happy byproduct of doing some other things well. So focus on what you're doing, focus on your job, make a real difference. Have the, I think the word greed which has been used, the word greed has a negative connotation because it is tainted by a motive.
So have hunger.
Dissatisfaction. Hunger can be positive. Hunger is about wanting to make a difference and doing something. Greed gives it a personal, selfish motive, and that's the connotation. And then my observation is the brightest of people, when faced with this sort of situation, when self-interest comes in, their judgment gets clouded and wrong decisions get made. So I would really urge that people avoid the temptation of being driven by that.
I'm going to start a new leaf in terms of the discussion with Adil, but before I do that, I want to ask the audience, is success equal to money? If you think yes, then raise your hand. Is success equal to money? Well, the serious pitch being made. The ideal young leaders you want to look forward to. Yes. Everyone meet Pramod outside the minute it's done.
You're immediately hired.
Forget individuals' motivations, and you just take an empirical view. right, of people, young leaders. And so I'll give you my observation on the empirical view. The empirical view is that for a variety of reasons, people find very exciting the jobs that pay the most. And they can immediately then tell you 10 reasons why they want that job, but it's not really because of the money. But mysteriously, it pays the most.
That's truly coming in from someone who's a consultant. He has a serious pulse on this one.
So, I go back and say, I think, at some level, there's lots of young people starting out. And to the extent that they are looking at this and trying to make some money, I think it's okay. As long as, over a period of time, all of these other things kick in. I don't think we want our young leaders to say, the first job I'll take will be in a village and won't pay anything, right? But I don't think we should kid ourselves. The empirical evidence suggests that money does drive people to choose between different things. What happens is that if you take unbridled ambition and unbridled money, right, that creates a lot of the problems. And that's what I would encourage you not to do, rather than the fact that, because empirically you are making choices based on money. I don't see any of that in our young leaders that we saw. I never saw anyone who said, I have a job at, at JP Morgan that's going to pay me $300,000 a year, and I'm just not going to take it. And I'm going to work, in BSNL for 3 lakhs a year. I didn't see anyone in our young leaders who did that.
You'd agree with what he said?
I have a point to add here. I think money is by far the most objective means of comparing. And a lot of what Mr. Zainulbhai made a point here as well deals with the same scenario. You're trying to compare constantly, and I think money becomes the most easy and objective way of being able to see where you stand in a very highly competitive world. And I think that's what drives a lot of these things.
Since this is about leadership, let's at least for now get away from money. Yeah, Amulya has a question that goes beyond the greed factor.
I think we've seen, we've talked a lot about this topic, but while young leaders are managing organizations and you're expecting them to manage organizations, in your experience, what are the pitfalls that young leaders should avoid, given their inexperience, which will help them better manage an organization?
Who would you like that question first to be answered by?
Mr. Zainulbhai.
Okay, Mr. Zainulbhai, that's your question there.
I think when you become too intense about managing, and you become too intense about what you're doing, then you lose a little bit of judgment and a little bit of perspective on what to do. And then I think people start making mistakes. So and I'll link this to a couple of things, which is, in India, we have a lot of the batch mentality. I was IIM class of this. He is doing this. I should be doing this. He's managing 7 people. I'm managing 3, So when you get too caught up in trying to achieve something along a set of steps like a ladder and keep on with everyone else, then I think you lose your judgment, because each person's situation is different. And I think you'd want to think about what makes sense over there and not get so carried away about whether the reward is 6 months from now, a year from now, or the promotion is a year and a half from now, 2 years from now. If you got away from that and tried to think about what you're trying to accomplish, then in general you will make fewer missteps in addition to other things. That would be one thing to keep in mind.
Pramod?
Another thing I would just mention as a point would be, undying ambition at the risk of everybody else, of upsetting other people, etc. What I think one of the things that people forget very easily is what goes around comes around eventually. And the group of people that you need to work with today, and if you have ambition which is unbridled ambition, which upsets a lot of people, at some point that can come back to bite you, and nor does it produce a conducive atmosphere. Because one of the things all of us must learn over time through leadership is the ability to work together with lots of people, the ability to influence. I think you can sometimes destroy that just with naked ambition showing through a little sharper than perhaps it's necessary.
Can I just pick that up and raise a question? And let me ask the 3 of you one by one. Kalpana, would you pick teamwork, team leadership over ambition? And I think that's a very real dilemma today in everyone's mind. Which of the two would you pick at this stage of their careers?
I don't think it's either or. I believe very strongly in this having a fire in the belly, hunger, the animal spirits, Sometimes even animal spirits has a negative connotation. To me, it has a very positive connotation. So that's absolutely essential. And somewhat in the context of the teamwork and the earlier question that was raised, see, today you have to view yourself as first amongst equals. Because you will find that the team that you're leading, there'll be several people there who are smarter than you, who have far more knowledge than you, and certainly is excelling in an area which is actually a big weakness in you. So call it teamwork, call it empathy, call it the ability to influence and work with a group of people. I think it's just as important as that hunger and fire in the belly is.
But how many of you actually have the dilemma? Let's pass the mic around here. Let's get some of these young leaders who are right here with us. Many of them are finalists. What do you think? Do you face this dilemma? And if so, at this level of your career, do you think it's teamwork that matters to you most or being aggressive as an individual?
And introduce yourself.
I'm Amit Bhatnagar. I work in a small consulting firm in Delhi. I think I face this very often. And I've tried to balance it, and I know I've failed at a lot of times at a lot of places. But I manage a lot of people who are definitely smarter than me. But we are in a growing firm, and we realize that at this time we can continue to grow. But at the time we stabilize, I think these dilemmas will probably hit us in a much more severe manner.
Okay, what do you think, gentleman with the red tie?
I think, I was lucky that my first boss, one of the first things he told me, that if you're working in a large organization, you need to work in a team, because otherwise you'll be reinventing the wheel yourself all the time, which is not what you want to do. That's just a wrong way. It's not efficient.
You're working in a large organization. Quick introduction.
Well, my name's Adhiraj. I work with a private equity firm now, so it's much smaller than my first organization, which was Shell, which was 100,000 people. But I got lucky. I think it depends a lot on the organization. If you're in an organization where your seniors don't recognize your contribution as an individual, even if you're working as part of a team, I think it becomes difficult. But if the organization is structured such that they do recognize that, then I think you can work in a team, you can be aggressive, and I think you can succeed.
Do you have a different take on that, Nitin?
No, I don't. I actually agree entirely with what Kalpana said. There are times when we force these are false choices. There is no choice. And I think one of the things that leaders need to learn to do is to have the capacity to balance seeming paradoxes. Absolutely. There is no paradox in my mind out here. It's a seeming paradox. And I think we force a choice in terms of saying, do you want this or do you want that? In fact, that's no choice as far as I'm concerned. Okay. The other thing I would really say to go on, if I was to look back and look at some of the advice that I got when I was young and I would give to anyone at this stage, I have seen more people do damage to themselves in their careers arising out of trying to think of themselves as prima donnas, one of the pitfalls early on, or the intellectual arrogance that you start developing when you're young. And I think that does more harm. I've seen more people who are smart and bright actually not benefit as a result of that, but suffer as a result of that because of the arrogance that creeps in and all the attendant issues that come in. So I think intellect is powerful, but intellect combined with humility becomes an unbeatable and an irresistible combination.
That's the point Harsh was earlier making.
And that's really what
Nidhi, you want to say something in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to add actually to this discussion and completely agree with you that I think we've often heard of this phrase, together everyone achieves more, which is how, you kind of define the team. And I'm fortunate to work for an organization which always puts people first. And that's how you don't compromise on the ambition as well, because you work together and achieve more. So you've achieved your ambition.
That's right. But Preetham, is it a real situation most of the time? Or sometimes there is that individual hunger that takes, supersedes rather?
Actually, I would feel that it's more of the leader and his hunger that drives the entire team. Because the team needs a direction, and that's where the leader fits in. If he has a hunger, he drives the entire team, then only things move on. Otherwise, there are multiple teams and multiple leaders, but the results are different.
The results are different. Okay, there's another element of discussion around leadership which has suddenly come to the fore with India producing so many entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in the making. Somebody was talking about reinventing the wheel. Is that really part of the story in corporate India's growth today? Let's get some questions from the audience.
We work in organizations which are more process-oriented as we go. And it's a necessity as you scale up. So, how do you fit in those enterprising skills which require you to think out of box, to things which are very different from what the process tell you. So how do you manage both of them?
Harsh, you want to start with that?
I think before I go into what he's asking, I think one good thing I realized when I met the young leaders was that many of them wanted to start businesses. And I think that was a great thing, and I've been interacting with...
Would you like it if these young leaders are also part of your organization and suddenly come up with these entrepreneurial idea and want to go out and start it all?
No, it's okay. I think as long as they are able to add value to whatever time they are, it's okay. And it's perfectly all right, I think, because each person anyway is there for a certain time, you know. You can't have people with you all the time, you know. But how do you, basically your question is in a large organization which is process-driven, how do you drive the culture of entrepreneurship or risk-taking? Is that the question? I think a lot will get dependent on the culture, in my opinion. And if the culture is not conducive to this, then I think it will be difficult, you know. You have your own sphere of influence, whatever you're managing. Within that, you can play that role. But at the other extreme, there are organizations where your sphere of influence is much larger. You are very more of what is known as the organization hat. You are asked to critique on organization strategies. You know, there are some parallel boards and many other mechanisms which make you wear the organizational hat. So I think one has to make a choice of the organization, I would say, and beyond a point, if the organization is very, very process-driven.
And also the senior management has to have an approach towards that. I mean, I think they probably have to take some clear calls as and when they allow the younger people within the organization do that.
I think it's cultural, as Harish said. I think it's very cultural. So I think as you think about which organizations you may want to work for, I think you've got to think about that. Because a lot of organizations, no question, the big ones get bogged down intensely with bureaucracy and process. But for instance, if Bharti Walmart, right? I'm just looking at some... No, I'm just giving an example of, for instance, things that you could do. You know, there are so many things that India needs in supply chain, in retailing, in how things work, that, you know, you're going to, I'm sure, have to find solutions like we did, like you did, every day in new ways. You're going to have to find a new solution for solving problems which, frankly, in many other countries you could take for granted because it's all set up. Here it's going to be new. And so I think, you know, solving those problems itself will force leadership out because in our companies, I think we only grow by solving for the leadership issues almost every day.
Sure.
And I think it's the opposite in other developed nations, perhaps, where you have a larger issue of the companies are set up so process-wise that perhaps you don't have as much opportunity.
Yeah,
but you should have great opportunity.
Look, first of all, this is a great time to do this, no matter which company you're in, because most companies in India are growing at 10, 15, 20, 25% a year. When things are growing that fast, then the chances of trying something new and being entrepreneurial are much larger. If you were in an enterprise that was growing at 1% a year, believe me, it's a lot more difficult to be entrepreneurial, and there the culture can completely swamp you. Okay? In India, everything's growing so fast that you have to be able to find an opportunity. So that's my first point. My second point is, you know, entrepreneurialism doesn't come on time. You know, you can't say, okay, I'm now 27, at the age of 28, I have to be an entrepreneur. Age of 29, I'll be worth so much, then I'll have so many people. It comes when the situation, your position, what you know, all of it comes together, right? So, but if you're testing for it and trying it all the time, then when the time is right, it'll all come together and be very big, right? So you can try to test your entrepreneurial skills in little pieces in big companies, or at any point in time, and suddenly it comes together for you, right? Most entrepreneurs didn't succeed at their first try. They didn't succeed necessarily when they were in the big company at some point. But many entrepreneurs succeeded in very large companies and did amazing things, right?
Actually, that's the
so
point.
That's the...
Preetham, you have been sort of talking about this whole entrepreneurial piece. What would your question be on this?
Yeah, actually, many young leaders like us would have aspirations to start their own business. So what are the top 5 mantras or success factors
they all want
you
to carry
suggest
back a little mental book
that you would suggest, especially from Mr. Mariwala, because you have that Marico Center of Innovation where you...
Okay. Actually, let's take it from everyone. Let me start with Kalpana and go to Mr. Mariwala and then step on. What 5? Do you have 5 on your fingertips?
So I have just one, which is a mantra I passionately believe in. You don't need to set up your own business to say you're an entrepreneur. I have spent 36 years of my life in the corporate world. I think I'm a big entrepreneur. And the corporate world gave me the luxury of not worrying about things that a lot of other entrepreneurs had to in terms of office space and how will I pay my secretary and manage all the admin. My organization managed all that admin and allowed my entrepreneurial juices to flow because I think we did so much innovation. And although I now work in a very large organization, large parts of which is in the developed world, but I still believe there is a great need for entrepreneurship there. Because I don't think anyone questions you when you're constantly asking questions, because in that very question, they themselves find a solution.
So it's not necessarily setting up a company, it's a spirit with which you actually continue in the organization.
A big lesson that I was taught by the late Professor C.K. Prahlad. And I remember an interaction with him 11 years ago. And he had asked me a question as to what he would want to see more. What did he think, or what did I think HUL as a company needed more? And I had said, if he could be more enterprising, more innovative, etc. And he says, what do you think that requires? And to cut a long story short, he simply went on the board and wrote 2 alphabets, A and R, and went on to describe that the only difference between a managerial mindset and an entrepreneurial mindset was the relationship between these 2 alphabets, A and R, where A stood for ambition and R stood for resource. And he said a managerial mindset sets an ambition which is equal to resource. An entrepreneurial mindset starts off with an ambition which is substantially greater than the resource. And it is in this inequality that has got created is the seed of all innovation. When there is an equality, there is no driver for innovation. When the moment you create an inequality between ambition and resource, you are forced to think differently, innovatively, to stretch that resource to meet that ambition. And there is no entrepreneur who starts off with more than a penny in his pocket, but he dreams of changing the world. And I think that mindset can be brought into bear, whether you run your own company or whether you are in business. Even if you have resources, you can artificially create that in organizations by raising ambition or constraining resource to get what you want.
Mr. Mariwala.
Just a little different point. I agree that you can have entrepreneurship in what Kalpana has done, but at least at a personal level, I've never had a boss. And I think I can't think of having a boss, if you ask me. So the biggest difference, apart from what she's saying, is that you are your own boss. I don't want to report to anybody.
I wonder how many of you are willing to go out and say, I'd like to be like that. I don't know how many of you would. Yeah? Okay.
So I think that freedom of actually driving your own decision and destiny. Because ultimately, if you're an organization, you're accountable to somebody.
Yeah.
So if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you are a privately held entrepreneur, you're not accountable to anybody. If you're a public company, then you're accountable to shareholders and others, board and all that. But I think that freedom of completely being on top, to me, is one of the biggest benefit of being an entrepreneur. Apart from what she's saying at a corporate level, yes, risk-taking, driving ambition, all that.
Let's put Mr. Mariwala's theory as a question to all of you. Mr. Mariwala wants to know how many of you feel that you need to be entrepreneurs outside of the suggestion that Kalpana made about being enterprising within your own organization.
I'm Soumya Dash from Cognizant. So yes, I agree that to a large extent, even large organizations, for example, I belong to a Cognizant today, which is more than 100,000 people strong. So Frank, giving his own example, has set up Cognizant Capital to encourage entrepreneurship ideas. But at the same time, I tend to agree with Harsh that ultimately an entrepreneurship, being your own boss, completely setting a path of your own is something which is completely different.
Hi, I'm Kaustubh, working with a firm called Abbott Vascular. I had my question around entrepreneurship itself, so it's good I got an opportunity to talk this time. That getting onto the point that ma'am made about entrepreneurship within organizations. So I feel that that opportunity does exist, but wouldn't that be under the constraints, or wouldn't the resources being made available to you be in the larger objective of the organization itself? So I would rather tend to agree more with Mr. Mariwala when a person who does not report to anyone, is not accountable to anyone, the real spirit of entrepreneurship would come out only then.
But I wonder, with that kind of a question, is that a quality of a growing leader, where you're hungry to be the man in control? And I just want to sort of take it from what he said, because, or the woman in control. Is that something that is an inherent quality? Does that reflect the hunger that we all have been talking about? Or is it too soon to look at that as an opportunity, to be that person in control?
I think there's a difference about risk, about your ability to take risk, which I think is different. I must tell you, having now a CEO of Genpact, I'm moving away, I'm trying to do my own thing. There are very often times at night when I do wake up with a sort of hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach, saying, do I know where I'm going? Do I know what I'm doing? I don't have all the resources.
You know, right now as you speak, they're all thinking, yeah, we're all hoping that after we have our bank accounts like yours, we will be thinking about entrepreneurship.
So I think it's about risk, clearly, and your appetite for risk. Because a lot of people may not have this appetite for risk. And having the appetite for risk, which allows you to think beyond the resources you have, is essential. Because otherwise you will stop. Otherwise you're never going to get off the ground because you'll always, there are 50 reasons not to do something. There's generally only one or two to do something. And you have to find those one or two and be convinced of them.
To not take risk is a big risk at a young leader's level, Ms. Morparia?
So I want to, not take a risk, I think is a big risk in itself. You should take risks. And for those of you who want to go out and start and be your own boss, good luck. But for those of you who want to stay in the corporate world, managing your boss, I think, is a great skill. So let me begin by making a statement. Bosses are a necessary evil that all of us have to live with. And I used to tell my team that all the time and say, but I'm the exception. And as you know, no one's an exception. So your ability to manage your boss, I think, is what the corporate world does allow you. It's all your influencing skills to convince your boss that your idea is worth backing and to get the necessary resources into it.
Can I make one comment on this issue of risk and entrepreneurship? I think you have to think a little bit about what you would like to achieve. You know, the guy who runs a kirana shop downstairs on any of the roads is an entrepreneur. His family is there. He's working 18 hours a day. His wife, his kids are all in there. And, you know, for our young leaders, I would say my ambition would be that you are an entrepreneur of a significantly higher scale than that. So don't club all entrepreneurship together. He may be his own boss, but that's not the ambition, I think, that you should have for what you're trying to do. Okay. So if you're trying to do something to change the world, then that may be a good experience to learn things. But think about how that experience is going to help you to create something that is large enough that justifies you being a young leader. That would be the only other thing I would say.
And has it impact on the organization? Before I go back to the audience, Rajesh has a question.
This is specifically for you, Mr. Basan. I've been one of those many who have benefited from the railroad that you built in the form of the BPO industry in India. So here's what I'm facing today. As a young leader, how does one handle the work-life balance piece, given the intense demand that is placed on us to personally monitor or execute, given the dearth of skill sets or specific skill sets in the business that we are in?
Yes. I'm afraid I'm going to give you a rather apolitical answer, incorrect political answer. You don't, unfortunately, and I wish we did. I'm not condoning it. I think the world today, and it doesn't apply just to our industry. Our industry is reality TV going on every day, right? That's the problem with our industry, right? You've got 40,000, 50,000 people over there constantly interacting with customers.
Today, even banks can say that.
Sorry?
Even banks can say that today.
They can, right? And it's not about, you know, call center stuff. It's about high-end analytics or whatever you may be doing, and you're always up, right? You're always on. And that is an issue. I do think that I think we tend to very quickly absorb too much, try too hard. I think India works incredibly hard. And I think India collectively needs to find a balance. I think I am always amazed, having worked in the US and UK for 25 years, I was always amazed. It didn't matter. People will call you on Saturday, people will call you on Sunday for work, they will want to talk to you. And I think that balance is something you must find. So I do some things myself personally. I don't pick up my BlackBerry and run around with it on Saturday and Sunday. I don't pick it up in the evening and I leave it alone after a certain point in time.
But do you think young leaders should also find it?
Absolutely.
Is it important for them to find it at that stage?
You must find it now because actually it's not going to get any easier. There is a myth out there which says as I grow higher, I can delegate more and life will become easier. No, it just becomes a lot worse.
So start early and find it. Okay,
and set your habits.
This discussion this evening actually is not just going to be all of you asking the questions. And I do know Ms. Morparia had this question for all of you about finding the work-life balance. You're more than welcome to ask any of our panelists or the audience there.
And I'm going to play a trick here and not tell you what my views on work-life balance are. So any one of you, what is work-life balance?
Hello, I'm Satpreet from Axis Bank. What I think about work-life balance is that maybe you can't balance your work and your life at every moment or every hour of the day. But during the week, during the month, you can find time for both the aspects, both the sides of your life. And it's the passion that you carry for work, the passion that you carry for your family. I think somewhere it automatically gets balanced.
Okay, so
if you are passionate about both, it gets balanced.
Okay,
that's
play
what
catch
I believe.
up. Anyone with a different view? Okay, give it to the person right here. The young leader, yeah.
My name is Ankit Jain and I'm from HUL. And I think on work-life balance, it's more about how much do you actually want. It's the desire in you to actually get that balance, because I think the more time that you give yourself in the day, your work hours will only keep getting extended. It's about how much can you tell yourself that if I have only 6 o'clock in the evening to complete my work, you will do it. And if you leave it open-ended and say that I can work till 9 or I can work on Saturdays, on Sundays, then it will just go on. So it's about how much can you actually do it for yourself, and you will actually see the actual potential coming out.
Okay, I know everyone's giving very ideal answers, but do you guys manage to do that? That's the important question here.
Hi, I'm Sachin Chaudhary. I'm from Patni Computers. My thought on this is, and I've been kind of dwelling on this point for quite some time, and I think my conclusion on this is, at least for myself, is that I am not able to kind of look at it on day-to-day basis, that whether my work-life balance is fine and I'm doing okay. But I look back over a period of last quarter or last month and say, look what I've achieved in office and whether I have compromised anything on it. And if not, if I say that, okay, I've been able to take care of whatever I had to on both the fronts, then I'm very happy about it. But I mean, at times, it does happen that, I might be working 16 hours a day, but I don't realize it.
Okay.
And then it impacts something, and then it's a little bit of unhappiness then that creeps in.
It seems to be a favorite topic. There's so many hands going up. Yeah, but Pramod and also Mr. Mariwala, quick take from you all as to whether achieving this is going to remain a challenge as India grows competitive. We're all talking about a, demographic dividend, where competition will be really the essence and the spinal cord of every single leader trying to grow. Somewhere you've got to compromise, right?
I think the challenge in India is actually to do a simple task actually takes a little longer here than it does when here, because a lot of the infrastructure isn't available, right? So your effort that you have to put in, as Adil said earlier, is actually higher. That's what absorbs a lot of the time, in fact. And we all have to learn to deal with it. I think we have to solve for it, because I think India is getting remarkably stressed out. I really believe that. As a whole, I think this is I would love to hear other people's views. I think India is pretty stressed out, and we've got to solve for it.
Okay, Harsh?
I think I have a different viewpoint.
Sorry. I think we are making a bigger issue of this than we need to.
Okay.
It's a very personal choice. I think this is not slave labor. You make your own choices. If young leaders out here start complaining about work-life balance, then what other choices are you going to make? You need to make your own choices. You need to decide what you want to do. First, it makes it appear as if work and life are very different. Work is a part of life. It's an important part, but still a part. You have to decide how big a part you want that to become of your life. And once you made the decision, if that's what it is, and for many people who make the choice that work is my life, work is my worship, that's what matters to you, that's fine. There's nothing wrong in that. You don't have to feel apologetic about working on a Saturday or working on a Sunday. Equally, if that's a different choice that you made, that's okay as well. Be comfortable with your choices and live with the consequences. That's all I would say about this.
Let me put this question differently to you. Do you view some of the people who are working under you differently because they seem to be there in office working many hours than others? Not to say that there could be many who are very efficient as well. So, I mean, do you look at the time spent, the number of hours spent differently? Let me put it that way.
Okay, I think I'll shift back a little bit to the question, if I was one of them, what would I do? And I think as rightly as Nitin had put it earlier, was that it is an individual choice. There are certain sectors where there is an occupational hazard, You have to work 24 hours in media. You can't escape. So if you don't want to do that, please avoid that sector. Then within certain sectors... Yeah, I'm telling you, no point if you're complaining, because that's a part and parcel of being that business.
Yeah.
Having said that, if you choose a sector, there will be different cultures amongst different companies in that sector.
FMCG is one of them?
No, within FMCG also you will have some companies where you work 15 hours a day, some companies you work 10 hours a day. So, and you can find out, what is the company's culture. I, for one, leave office every day at 6, 6:30. Everybody knows that I leave the office at 6 or 6:30.
But what about the others?
I think most of the people leave early. But we have a flexible working hours, so we can say, okay, whatever time you want to come in, you can come in. Whatever time you want to leave, you can leave.
Okay.
But separately, I think you choose the right organization which is relevant for you. And that work-life balance will go on changing at your personal lives also. If you're just married or if you just had a kid, at that time you realize it more that, okay, I need to spend more time with the family. So I think you make your choices accordingly.
Okay, let's get some more questions from our young leaders here. Atma, you have a question.
Yeah, I think it's a really an honor to be here and a real pleasure to be on this panel. One thing that comes here is that we've received recognition amongst our peers, and with this recognition comes some kind of responsibility. So my question to Nitin is, what do you think that young leaders can do to assist business leaders in sustainability?
So I don't know what you can do to help leaders in this whole area of sustainability, but I can see how you can help in the conduct of business in general. One of the big risks that organizations face today is grappling with and dealing with the incredible amount of change that is happening. And the more time you spend in an organization, the more fixed some of your views about how you do things, the models that we've operated with, the way we do things start happening. And I think what young leaders do, they come in with a fresh perspective, untainted by the way organizations have been run, a certain degree of curiosity, a certain degree of willingness to challenge the status quo. And I think what young leaders can do is to retain this as they go through the organization, ask questions, challenge the status quo, and push the boundaries and in terms of what you're doing. And my experience is that much of the change that happens in the organization actually does not start top down. It happens when there's a young leader who's asking the right questions, has the courage, has the conviction, willing to experiment, take some risk, and get it to a stage, which then some big man says, and then uses his position to roll it out across the rest of the organization. But the way I see it is, this is the most significant way in which young leaders can contribute.
Yeah. Okay. What do you all feel, Amulya? What do you feel about that kind of a contribution? Do you think as young leaders you do get that opportunity that Nitin mentioned just now?
I think historically it may not have happened, but honestly what we are seeing nowadays are managers are becoming more and more open to suggestions from their employees. I think they realize the fact that they need to connect more with the team down below, and for that they are openly encouraging suggestions from everyone, and I think that's a very positive move which we've seen recently, honestly.
Ms. Morparia, I think a lot of people here would be curious to know whether all the key eminent panelists, from within the India Inc. community, do they get to learn from the young leaders? And if so, what do they get to learn from the young leaders?
So I think it's a constant learning. I'm speaking for myself here, that I learned more on that one day when you gave me the opportunity to meet up with 8 people than I think any one of them learned from me. Because in today's day, and it's again very true in this decade and the decades to come from now onwards, where information and knowledge is all pervading and all permeating. The old corporate structures, if you remember, were patterned around the military and command and control structures. The communication information changed all of that dramatically. So I find that young leaders are several times smarter than I am, have far better knowledge and grasping than I ever did, have far better analytical skills. So for me, it's a reverse learning all the time from them.
Yeah. Adil, you think that the structures that Kalpana talks about, they actually have somewhat eased up and they're giving that two-way flow that we seem to talk more in theory than in practical?
I think absolutely. If I think back on in any project that we do or any work that we do with our clients and with us, the best ideas are coming from, the craziest ideas also, by the way, not just the best, are coming from anyone on the team.
Good, you mean or no?
No, some crazy good, some crazy bad, right?
Okay.
And so we get ideas from anyone. And I think to actually do what others tell you to do is probably not what we'd expect from young leaders. So I think the structures today allow it, and the ones who are smart figure out how to do it. That doesn't mean to say that there's no judgment or that can't be helped by the team or by the seniors. Yeah. But you have ideas and you have access to all information compared to what one had before. And therefore, the opportunity to actually make a difference is tremendous. And therefore, our learning from each new person and our young leaders is actually, I completely agree with you, is tremendous.
Okay, back to some questions from the CEOs to the young leaders. So you can ask any of those.
I don't remember, but I think you have them, right?
Yeah, I do actually. So let me pick up one. Yeah. This is going to be a bit of a, I would say, raffle here. Let's pick up, what is the role of a leader as they transit from being a young leader to one in the middle management, and how does that evolve as they grow to senior management? That was one of the key questions that Harsh had put out, and anyone who has answers can raise their hand.
Hi, my name is Harish Dunake. I work with Wipro. I think the most important role for a person when he grows from a middle management to senior management is to create more leaders. His job is to create more leaders who can actually work like him and execute and proactively create more wealth for the company.
Okay, so what are the challenges that come along? Let's get some more questions around that aspect. Growing in the corporate structure.
This is Manish from Tata Consultancy Services. One important point that I think that a person should have moving from a young leader to middle management and then to senior management is that a person should be able to identify what he or she does well, and that should make him or her able to delegate well. He or she should be able to identify that is something can be done better by others, and that proper delegation should be there, and that should evolve more as he progresses to the senior management.
Okay, one more comment and then we'll get the CEOs to go. Okay, go ahead.
As a person grows, he has to derive value.
Ma'am, your name once.
My name is Sandhya Shriram. I am from Hindustan Unilever Limited. As a person grows in an organization, he has to derive value for that grey hair that he gets. That is that element of balance. A young leader has energy, has creativity, but probably that balance that comes with experience is what a person adds to the organization as he grows.
Okay, so let's get perspective from those who've seen it at all. I'll start with you, Nitin. What do you think is key for them to move, let's say, middle and then on to becoming a truly important leader in the top management?
I think by the time people get to middle management and looking to get to senior management, there are some things which are given. Their intellect, their drive, their goal-directed behavior, all of that becomes a given. And one of the things that I would see for a leader who's going to break into senior leadership position is softer aspects of character, of value system, what drives you, what motivates you, how do you start thinking of the role of business in the larger society? Is it about money? Is there a larger purpose? To my mind, it's really about judging the inner moral compass that a person has. And the more finely tuned it is, the more confidence it would give me in terms of the readiness of this individual to go up, because by that stage, other aspects are pretty much given in terms of the people who've got there.
As young leaders, would you agree with that? Atma, let's start with you. Soft skills matter.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's not emphasized enough in India, I found. I was born and raised outside, and coming from there, in the West, soft skills are very much emphasized in education and in training as well when you enter the workforce. I think that's something that definitely we could do better in India, in terms of networking, relationship skills, personal commitment to society as well. Right. So some of the things that, the softer skills that we don't necessarily pick up, on day one, but we need to develop in ourselves.
Okay, but Nidhi, do you think you look up to your immediate leader to give you that sense? Do you look up for sessions to happen within the organization that give you those softer skills? Or how does it work? I mean, or of course, there is always a culture to fall back on, but truly, who do you look up to for all of it?
Actually, to a lot of people, definitely my immediate leader is somebody that I totally admire. I think there's a lot to learn from your immediate, not just leaders, your peers, your team members, everybody. And, like somebody in the audience just said, that I think, with experience, you learn a lot of these softer aspects as well. And you do realize that, okay, I've proven the fact that I can individually execute, but now what can I do to make sure that there are others in the organization who can execute just as well? And so I think once you realize that, you have to work on the softer aspects.
Okay, so if it's about soft aspects, yes, Pramod, you want to add something?
I would add a couple of points, if I may. One is the ability to deal with change and to change. And I think that's a very important element of being able to judge as you move from middle to senior management, is to recognize when you need to change, recognize reality. One thing you know for certain is over a working career of 25, 30 years, a lot of stuff is going to change. And your old established ideas may get overrun or obsolete or whatever. I think that's a very important element that recognizing that becomes very, very important. And the second thing, if I may, is leadership comes in all shapes and forms. There are leaders who are reclusive, there are leaders who are charismatic, there are leaders who are flamboyant, there are leaders who are confident. Some leaders are driven by their confidence, some are driven by their lack of security. They come in all forms. At some level, you're going to have to find your own form, your own core competence, as to this is what makes you. Someone can be a great inventor or executor. I think they come in all shapes and sizes. Peter Drucker said it well. The only leader that counts is the one that has some followers behind him. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. That's the only leader that matters.
Sure. Add one more thing. I think very briefly at an individual level, when you are at junior level, you're doing things. When you're at the middle level, you're getting things done. And when you're at senior level, you're influencing things. So that influencing thing is very important because things are not under your control. You have to influence people who are 3 levels below you. You have to influence government authorities, you have to influence suppliers, you have to influence media, you have to influence investors. So the influencing ability is very, very important. They're not under your control, but how are you able to influence them? And everything happens through influence, indirect means, rather than directly, they're not reporting to you.
Is influence power? Ms. Morparia, you had a very interesting question for this audience, which you shared with me. What does power mean to young leaders? I think that's a very a question that can give you a great perception into what people are thinking. Let's get some answers to Kalpana Morparia's question. Short answers. What does power mean to you?
Good evening. I'm Suresh. I work for IBM. To me, power would be the ability to bring about change in many aspects, and more importantly, get people around me to work with me in order to bring about that change. That pretty much to me sums up power.
Does that sound like a good answer to you?
It sounds like straight out of my mouth.
Oh, wow.
I said power to means fairy godmothers.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Swati Jain. I work with RPG Group in KC International Limited. I think for me, power means more responsibility. With power comes more responsibility. And the way you deal with power, I think there are many ways, and the more ethical you are, I think that's the right usage of power. Okay. And I rightly agreed with Mr. Bhasin when he said change, because according to me, at young leader level, it's the individual contribution that matters. At the middle management, it is the leading people that matters. And rightly, as Mr. Mariwala said, that at the top, leading change matters.
Okay, let's get one or two more.
For me, power is all about you and your team getting successful in whatever tasks you are doing, and eventually that is kind of your organization is getting benefited out of it. So it's all about managing the change and ensuring that everybody is kind of getting successful and everybody is growing. So that is what I feel power is all about.
I think it's a mix of being able to direct change that really matters, and at the same time being completely aware of the responsibility that came with that power and the expectations that were set. So that combination is what really
Is that what it means to you as well, Preetham?
For me, I think power means, can you drive positive change? Can you give to the community more than what they have given to you? So driving up positive thinking, driving alternative thinking is what means power to me.
When would you say that you're powerful in your organization, Amulya?
Say you're powerful when you're able to, again, influence things, honestly. Your sphere of influence is large enough when the whole culture, you are able to influence the culture in the organization. That, I think, is the time when you can really influence the entire culture of the organization.
Okay.
Power is one of those double-edged swords, just a little bit like money was. We focus too much on power, and it starts driving bad behavior because you try and think about how much power can I get. And power by itself becomes good, and you start seeing people who play games in corporate politics and others who are trying to amass power because it seems to be something that they want to do for its own sake. You see that actually much more in the political circles, actually much more so than in business circles. I would just say, as you think about what is power and what power does, while it has a lot of ability to do good, which you all have all talked about, never forget that it has the negative side of it. And before you are before you notice it, it'll seduce you into the dark side. Okay, so make sure that you keep that. I guess
the point. Just one addition to what I think: power and respect. I would look at respect rather than power.
That's a good point.
I think respect you can get. Actually, you can influence things by respect. If you earn respect of others, you will be able to influence. Power, to me, again, is a negative word. If you ask me, I would look at earning respect rather than being powerful.
From the business vocabulary, you've got a lot of new words that have suddenly become negative. It's so unfair to everyone who reads through these books every other day. I want to get 2 questions for sure. One from Nitin and one from Adil to the audience. One question you'd like to put to them.
What have you done to make the world a better place as a young leader?
Like what I should do or what I'm going to do to make this world a better place. Basically, when we talk about leaders, we are basically oriented only towards the business community. We are not at all talking about the society. So we should basically, apart from business, we should talk about the society, what exactly we are going to give back to the society. And once you are able to work to something towards the society, once you are able to do something for the society, this world would be heaven. That's what I just wanted to do this for this world.
So you're saying that's the ideal situation, or that's what you believe you're going to be doing?
That's what I believe we all should do. We should not only think towards our personal goals, we should think towards our society also. Okay. That's what we would be able to make the difference.
I work for the pharma company. I mean, instead of finding whether I have made the impact or did I do something which has content change, I can find out in my work what I do. For example, every medicine I make, I connect it with how does it impact to the mankind, how it improves the livelihood of people. That is something which any one of us does. And as sooner or later, and the moment we start connecting this dot, that how my work impacts the community at large, and the moment I understand and realize that yes, it does, then that's the sweet spot.
I think there's an interesting question hidden there. How do you measure the impact young leaders make to the organization? Is there a feedback mechanism? Is there a way by which you have someone tell them that they're having an impact? Do you think that's something that CEOs need to think about?
I'd be surprised if you do things and don't realize you're making an impact. Yeah, I mean it. When you do some things, you yourself will sense the impact that you have. When your ideas start getting traction, this respect that you start getting, the influence that goes beyond the title that you've actually got.
But is that asking too much from a young leader? I'm just worried if there is going to be no one to tell them.
No, I think all organizations have processes which allow for feedback to be given to individuals. And all good organizations will have half-yearly feedback, annual feedback, telling you about your strengths, your weakness, your areas of development, all of that. In fact, there's plenty of that process going around for you to get it. But my real message is that while all of that is useful, I don't know of anyone who in his heart of heart doesn't know and doesn't realize whether he or she is making a difference, whether he is making an impact, or he or she is relatively insignificant in the larger scheme of things. If you're honest with yourself, you will know it. If you're not, and your boss is honest, he will tell you. And that happens every 6 months in most organizations, certainly every year, if not every 6 months.
Yes, of course, and that's the time some people look forward to, some don't. Okay, we'll come around to a couple more before we wrap it up. Yeah.
There is one common thread which ties all the leaders on the dais. All of them have worked for the same firm for more than 25 years. I mean, I am including Harsh as well. Yeah, though he did not have a choice. But so we see that you have added tremendous amount of value to the organization and have got tremendous amount of value back. But during that period, when you were making certain choices between, say, growth in a different firm or developing yourself in the same firm, what is the sort of dilemma that you faced, and why did you make the choice to stick in the same firm?
Good question. And it puts all of you in the spot now.
One, I always feel that the risk of leaving is far greater than the risk of staying. That's just remember. I think we often forget that. You know, you're in a company, you've established your credentials, your boss knows you, your peers know you, your ability to influence. You have no idea whether the manager you're going to work for, who sounded terrific in an interview, is actually an ogre or she is an ogre, and you can't work. So I think that's one, or the career path, etc. So your knowledge, lack of knowledge itself stops you. Two, you have to build a career. I really believe that. You have to build a career because your learning comes in that fashion, and by being able to build that, an organization itself will also trust you more. I mean, if I have a choice of who I go to, do I go to somebody who's been with us for a long time? Do I go to a brand new person? Some of that becomes fairly obvious.
What's the answer to that, though? Quickly tell us what's the answer.
Oh, very
to who
clearly,
you go to.
I'll trust the person who's been there for a long time, unless, sometimes you go outside the organization to hire people and new products or new strategies or new markets. And of course, in those selected areas, you need them and you bring new blood in to refresh the organization. All of that is absolutely true. But the broad answer I would always give you is you have to build a career, you establish your credential in the company. And it is a learning that you establish over years, which allows you to do what we talked about earlier. Go from young leader to middle management to senior management and see how that progresses over time.
Okay, let's get final words. Yeah.
If I was to really say, firstly, there will be as many or more people who've reached senior positions having changed organizations than having stayed in the same organization. So I think this just happens to, many, many more. It just happens that you have a panel out here which hasn't. If I was to look at it, I don't think I looked at wanting to stay in this organization over this 24-year period. So that wasn't a goal at any stage, that I'm going to join and I'm going to be there 24 years later or 25 years. It just so happened that at different points in time and through this 24 years, I was enjoying myself. If I was enjoying what I was doing, I was finding challenges which were interesting, I was growing, then the reason for leaving was never compelling enough. But I don't think you can join an organization and either have this view that the longer I stay, the better it will be, I must build it in one company, etc. I think that's not right, that's not relevant. You have to judge what's working for you. And if you're happy, if you're enjoying it, you've got challenges, you're growing professionally, personally, why would you want to change? Then I agree. The risk of change is much more.
It's the opportunity that's more important than the organization.
Absolutely. And the identification really with the organization, the challenges that you have on growth. So for me, ICICI was part of my name. And I always remind people I retired from ICICI, did not leave ICICI to join JP Morgan.
Mr. Zenubai?
At McKinsey, 95% of the people who join leave at some stage. In a very short period of time, and in the first actually 5 years, right? So I think there's some people leave, they try different organizations. I think it's interesting. But there are some organizations in which the senior management team at that organization will be ingrown. There are other sectors where that's not true at all, and where there's much more movement. But it just so happens that we are from organizations like Hindustan Lever, General Electric, ICICI, and McKinsey, where the senior leadership was homegrown. So I think that's not the case in every company. So I think you have to choose at different points in time.
But Adil, if I may ask, is it true? Isn't it true that the majority of people at the top are from the organization? If you look at data for developed countries.
Across the world, that's not true anymore.
Yeah. Right. But certainly in India, that debate is still on with the number of succession planning stories that are going on, whether it's an inside person or an outside person. Okay, we have to wrap this up, but I'm going to actually wrap it up with a question that was raised by somebody here, looking for mantras. And much that we don't want to turn a book around this, but I would like to take those 5 mantras with one word each from the CEOs as we wrap up this show. So I'll start with you, Ms. Morparia. One particular quality that you'll permanently look forward to in any young leader?
Since I'm asked to name only one, the one thing it's more a mantra that I believe in, and I would urge each one of you to really seek it out, is seek feedback. You've got to have an insatiable hunger to get feedback, and not necessarily through a structured process. Trust your peers, trust your subordinates. Bosses will always give you feedback, but trust your peers, trust your subordinates, give them feedback and get feedback from them.
Character. I would never want to ever deal with a person whom I'm thinking of. Do I have to look over his shoulder? What is he going to do? So to me, if I had to choose one attribute, I would take character.
Harsh?
So leverage your strengths. Each person is born with certain strengths. And if you are able to identify your own strengths, first is identification, and then leveraging it in roles which are relevant. So you actually leverage your strengths in roles where you can build on your strengths. Because many times we try to improve on weaknesses. Because there is a point you can improve on weaknesses, but strength is your passion, logically. And passion will actually drive success. So identify your strengths and go into roles which are actually where you can leverage your strengths.
Pramod?
Well, I actually used the word I was going to talk about, which is passion and energy. You have to have that level of energy. This is going to be a long haul. This is a 30, 35-year haul. That's what you got to do. You have to have a lot of energy and stamina and passion.
Sometimes the way you say it, you almost say, don't try and look for the work-life balance you were talking about. No, that ain't looking right. Yeah, final word with you, Mrs. Edubai.
I would say it's tough to think about characteristics, but you can judge a leader by whether or not they have followers, which is what you said, right? So sometimes we think that they have these 6 characteristics, they should be a leader, and they're not. You look and say they don't have followers. So one thing I would look at is, can you inspire others, and do you have followers? And if you don't, there's something you're doing that's not quite right.
I think
Can I add one more?
Okay, sure.
Because all the young leaders, and I think I've seen especially MBAs, they get excited by strategy. I think execution is also equally important. Strategy is important, execution is equally important. You know, I think strategizing is great fun, you know, but execution is a lot of hard work, rigor, persistency. And I think leaders, one advice is be execution oriented. It may not be as exciting, but it's very, very critical to your success.
Okay, very critical. And all of that takes me to the final statement of this evening and this show, which is whatever you do, always want to be a leader. I think that's something that all the CEOs have reflected on, have the desire to be a leader at all points. And all our young leaders here seem to have, of course, gotten somewhere and are looking forward to a much brighter future as leaders of tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us. It's been such an amazing audience, and all of you being young leaders, thanks so much.